Osiyo Ulihelisdi nigade Dagwado B. This is the Arcane Alienist. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Arcane Alienist. This will be my last episode of November, which is Native American Heritage Month. Um, Part two of the review for Coyote and Crow is up. Part two is actually is on Carl's show, the Arcane, or not the Arcane Analyst. That's this show, the GMologist Presents. So that is up streaming now and also up on Carl's YouTube channel. So be sure and check that out. That we go through the a little more of the some finer points of the sort of setting lore that we didn't cover in the first part of the review, and then get into the mechanics of the game and how characters work. So be sure and check that out. It's kind of long and a little bit of pauses and meandering. Again, we were kind of recording kind of late in the evening, but it's pretty good casual conversation, and I think we though kind of do a pretty thorough job of covering what you might want to see. So, but it is a pretty lengthy episode, so you may have to chunk it down into two or three listenings to get through all of it. But go ahead and check it out. I have some calls regarding that, and then today I want to talk about one. Naasii, which is a dice game that comes from the same publishers of Coyote and Crow, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But I want to get through these calls first, and then we'll talk a little bit about this game, which is a dice game, which is sort of a push your luck game, which draws some inspiration from some traditional native games. But let's get to the calls before we do that. So we've got first call is from our old friend Jason Carnley. So let's hear what Jason has to say.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Really enjoying what you're doing this month. Thank you for doing that. I hope you and your family have a happy Thanksgiving. You probably hear this message after that, but thought is what counts, right? Anyhow, really cool stuff. I will check out the Bobcat. I picked up Coyote and Crow back a while back. Haven't totally read all the way through that yet, though. Still need to finish it. I agree with you on comic books. The idea that they really get the wheels going in your brain, get you looking up words. I know Marvel Comics did that for me with putting big words in there and different things in there, and I would have to go and research those. Of course, back then we didn't have the internet, so it wasn't nearly as easy as it is now to research words and phrases and things and look up historical events. We actually had to go to encyclopedias or dictionaries or things like that. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. Comic books really are a good thing for kids. And the important thing is to get kids reading and thinking, and whether that's comic books or other books or whatever, it doesn't matter. But you have to get those wheels turning. So anyhow, keep up the great work, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for the call, Jason. I always appreciate hearing from you. Yeah, what more to say? I'm right there. Reading comics, and I think also fantasy literature sometimes, and science fiction as a kid, but particularly a lot of comics. I would have to go look up things about historical events, scientific theories. I think I mentioned this on the last episode. And yeah, I'm with you. It was before the internet. It was the World Book Encyclopedia. A lot of times, having to pull that off the shelf. Fortunately, my mom had got me a set when I was in grade school. It was still mostly relevant by the time I was in junior high school reading comics. But also I could go look at stuff at the school library if I couldn't find it there. So yeah, but comic books definitely inspired me to get a little more curious. Maybe I was already curious, but it sort of showed me the things I wanted to be curious about, to learn more about sort of what the author was talking about, or the bigger context of what was being referenced in those pages. So I think you'll probably find a lot of us who grew up reading comics will have similar stories of that sort of helping us with our sort of education along with regular schooling. But thanks again for the call, and yeah, definitely check out the Bobcat. You can get issues on his website. Um, and then, yeah, I'm glad you bought Coyote and Crow. Maybe you can get in on a game with us sometime. I think I'm looking forward to maybe running that um, with Carl and Sarah and maybe some other people somewhere in the near future. And then I think that may be the one that actually gets me to run games at a convention. I've been to a couple places locally, local cons where I'm like, people are selling this game. You know, the books are for sale, the dice are for sale, but nobody's really doing any demo games to get people to play. So if nobody else steps up to that, maybe that's something I'll consider doing. You know, in the next round of local conventions here close to where I live. Um, the next call we have is from somebody we haven't heard from in a long time, which is Brian of the Have to Look That Up podcast. I think his podcast is sort of kind of on hiatus. I don't know for how long. I know he's gotten very busy with stuff. So this is kind of a long. He left a pretty long message here. But I want you to go ahead and listen to it. But I will say, because it really addresses our first review of Coyote and Crow, I'm going to play the messages here just to have them on the episode for people to listen to. But I actually also we listened to these messages from Brian in the part 2 of our review, and so you can hear more complete answers and responses to what he's saying from both me and Sarah and Carl. So go check that out in part 2 of our Coyote and Co review. But I do want to play the messages here because this is where Brian originally left them. So let's hear what Brian has to say.
Aloha, BJ. It's Brian. I used to have a podcast. It's kind of on hiatus for a while. And I think I might have called in a couple of years ago, but I've been listening to your podcast and really enjoyed the first part of your Coyote and Crow review done with Sarah and Carl. I guess just a few thoughts. I backed this when it came out. I was pretty excited. I grew up in the U.S. I live now in Australia. And although I'm not of Native American ancestry, I think the idea, when the idea was pitched, it's pretty cool. Just in general, just kind of imagining a different future, especially from a future of the Americas or North America not being colonized, and just what can happen. As a game concept first is pretty interesting. So just as a game in comparison to other games, I think the setting and the concept and just the creativity that goes in the lore is interesting and compelling, and makes me want to play it. And in going through the PDF, now that it's been released, I get the same sense. And I do think I don't want to get too. Yeah, I don't, I don't want to stray too far from games, but I do think it's important, and I think the creator's been pretty open about it, at least the way that I've interpreted it. And I've even had some email exchanges, kind of it was released, with some updates, pretty great email exchanges, I should say. Is just I think it is great that there is a game that's made by Native American creators, with Native Americans as sort of a primary or as an important audience. But I also love that the push is that, hey, this game is for everyone. And I think, like all games, and especially independent games, this gives an opportunity, one, to play a great game, play something new, for people that may be only exposed to a certain set of games. But two, and I'll just say, as someone who's not Native American, and even in the country that I'm living in now, I'm not Indigenous. I'm not even. I mean, I am a pure immigrant. My wife's from Australia, but I immigrated here, to live with her and to raise our son here, and it leads to that curiosity. And you guys hit on it during the discussion that, like, you can enjoy the lore and the game, but it's based and inspired by so many different native nation cultures. And I like how you talked about that could lead to conversations, out of game, maybe away from the table, which I think is great. And I think is something that's needed, and maybe that's getting a little bit too high a goal. But I like that that's a part of it, if it makes sense. I think I may be in a minority, from the sense that I know, gosh, over the last, and probably not just the last 5 years, it's been 10 or more. Growing up in the U.S., I've kind of come to learn a lot of things and question and look at my own family's background. My family are Italian immigrants, and I've been reconnecting with that. And of course that's a small story, but in living here and working with a lot of people from different Asian countries, especially Southeast Asian countries, I think it's really important to get different perspectives, and I think there's different perspectives on types of games. Different RPGs, ones that emphasize certain things over others, and from that it could lead to greater conversations about cultures. So maybe that's a RPGs trying to solve world world problems, maybe, but so that's probably a stretch too far. Anyway, sorry I left a few messages. Please don't feel the need to use all of these. I'll just wrap up by saying, yeah, thanks for the review. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next part. And I'm gonna get this game to the table. I need to put some thought behind it, and I'm waiting. The physical version is coming over to me with some family here in a few weeks, because I think it's important to kind of show the physical book around to everybody, and the art, and let them have a chance to look through it as we kind of explain this. And yet I don't know that any. I mean, I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure no one will be of Native American origin. I might be wrong. However, being here in Australia, there might be some folks with some First Nation, Indigenous origins here, or I'd say similar backgrounds. So I'd be just very interested to see how they approach and what they think of the game and some of the concepts in it. Thanks.
So, aloha, Brian. Thank you for the calls. So I'll wrap up here. Just say, again, go check out our Carl's latest episode to hear our responses to that. And there's a general thank you to both Jason and Brian for calling in. Be sure and check out the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. I'll put a link in the show notes. And also into Brian's podcast. It's been about a year or so since he put out an episode, but he's got some good episodes if you want to go back and listen to his previous episodes. There's some good stuff in there as well. And with that, we will move on to the topic for the show. So it is probably difficult to explain how a dice or a similar game works. I mean, imagine me sitting here trying to explain Farkle or Yahtzee or something like that, just with the sound of my voice, with no pictures and no video or anything like that. So I'm not going to try to do that, but I do want to at least highlight this game Naasii, which comes from Coyote Crow, and the way it sort of reflects games, particularly an element of role-playing games, which is using dice or another randomizer to always when outcomes aren't certain. So role-playing games are not just dice games, but the dice mechanic figures so prominently in role-playing games and in tabletop war games and in board games, the kind of things that gamers get into, as well as pure dice games. But I wanted to talk about this a little bit, just to maybe talk about sort of the way the meaning of these things in some indigenous Native American cultures. Dice-like games, even though I don't think we have dice like you may be thinking of them today, have certainly exist among traditional Native games. So we have sports, which are more athletic games like stickball and chunky and other things like that, which field games. And we talked about stickball a little bit in our first Coyote and Crow review, but and then you've got these what would be more games you would play, sitting around at home, with friends or family, that are more what sort of the equivalent of, again, of dice games, board games, things like that. And push your luck, games of chance, those types of games are a common theme. Of course, it's not unique to Native culture, but there are some interesting ones out there that you can certainly find on the internet and figure out ways to play with yourself, oftentimes with some simple homemade objects or things you have laying around the house, because that's how traditionally native people would do that. They would have to work with the things they could find in their environment to craft, things for these games. So one example is the bean game. It's pretty simple, and this comes from my own ancestors, the Cherokee. And you've got a little bowl or dish, or and you put 7 flat-sided beans. They might use a peach pit or another kind of seed. You've got 7 of them, and you paint them or color them on one side so that you've got 2 different colored sides, and then you kind of shake the basket and toss them up in the air, and you try to catch them and flip them to the unmarked side is up. And so players take turns back and forth, and scores are total on how many of these things you can flip on your turn. And again, it's probably hard to visualize, but if you just Google it, you can see pictures and other information. That's the bean game. Something that's probably a little more well known is hand game, which is also called the stick game, or I've heard it called the bone game. And you've got 2 teams. It's a guessing game. And you have these, what are called the hand game bones. They kind of look like dominoes. They'd be made out of bone. And they've got different patterns on them. One of them is striped and one of them doesn't have any stripes. And again, Google this, you can see pictures of it. And so you take turns when it's your team's turn to one team is hiding and one team is guessing. If you're the hiding team, you take 2 of your team members and they arrange these bones in their hands, while the other team tries to make a lot of noise. They may sing a song. They may shake a rattle or beat a drum or do something to sort of distract the other team from really focusing on what you're trying to do as you arrange these bones in your hands. So while your teammates distracting you do that, and then you present your hands. There'll be 4 hands presented by 2 of the teamers, and somebody from the other team has to guess what order where you've hit. They've got to find either the striped or the unstriped. It varies by tribe whether you're looking for stripe or the non-striped. But you could do this simply with red and blue, black and white. I mean, you could literally do this with dominoes if you don't have anything else. Just pick 2 different dominoes. If you're looking for something you might have around the house, but people would, then you try to pick. Okay, where are I've got 4 hands presented in front of me. 2 of them have the thing I'm looking for, which for this example, say the bone with the stripe on it. 2 of them don't, and I've got to guess where they are, and then we score that, and then we switch sides. And so again, it's a guessing game, but you get to where the sticks come in. The sticks sort of count almost like currency. So each team has a number of sticks, and you start betting with the number of the sticks, on the outcome of each round, and you play till one team has all the sticks. But you can see easily with both of these games, but particularly with the hand game, how gambling could get involved, for fun, where people might use traditionally maybe trade goods, fabrics, food items, blankets, or pelts or something like that. Today people will just, if they want to put game involved, they'll just use money, but you could do it for again, trade goods, traditionally, and you could see you could also we take bets on how many beans I can flip over in the bean game, right? If you got a particularly skilled player, so that push your luck, that element of chance is involved in these games. Again, there's a randomizer and there's an outcome and there's a strategy that evolves once you get familiar with the way things work and you start thinking about, learning a little bit about probability, particularly with the hand game. Again, you start to see the parallels, I think, to how we use dice in dice-based games, but also in role-playing games. And I think you'll see various role-playing games. I know they've done this in Dungeons and Dragons. They've done, I'm sure the games in it, where they will create some sort of dice game or card game or small mini game that you and your friends could just play, just as a game, or you can make it an encounter uh, in an adventure where person has to play. One of the characters has to get involved in playing the game. So the DM and the player are playing the game, and the DM in the role of an NPC, and the player in the role of their character. But they're playing it to resolve something or to help move along a piece of an adventure. So those are oftentimes used as neat little distractions or things added to a role playing game, and that's the same thing that Coyote and Crow has done with Naasii. This is a game that you can play. It comes with the dice, but they match pretty much the 12-sided die that you would get in the just standard Coyote and Crow dice, and that there are 9 white die and 3 black die. The white die are called the Coyote die. The black die are the Crow die. Now, if you're just using them for task resolution in Coyote and Crow, I don't think it really matters which dice you use. It really, I think the color scheme fits into this Naasii. This game I'm looking at the insert here, was designed by Connor Alexander, who is Cherokee. And there's some other, they credit some developer Daryl Andrews, some layouts, Christopher Coyle, rules editor, the Meeple editor. There's a list of playtesters. The art for the packaging is also designed. It has a native designer, Wolf Tomi Akitu, who is credited here as being Comanche and Apache. Again, so you've got native artists and creators, game designers working on this game. And so again, this is a game that you could just play for fun, with your friends and family, or it's a game that you could insert in Coyote and Crow. And if you're using the Coyote and Crow dice, you've got the dice you need. And again, it's kind of hard to describe a dice game as you sit, but it's pretty cool. So the idea is you're rolling. Again, this reminds me a little bit of Yahtzee, a little bit of Farkle, but also it draws inspiration, particularly from the bean game and the hand game. They list those specifically as things that given some inspiration for how this game works. But in basically what you do is you start with 3 white die, the Coyote die, and you roll, and you're trying to get a set, which would 3 of the same number, or a run, 3 numbers in a row, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And these are 12-sided die. 12s are always considered wild. 1 through 11 just are the face value, but a 12 is wild. They don't have to really determine what the wild stands in for till the end of their turn when they try to score. So you roll 3 white die, and you've got to lock one of them. So at least one of them, you've got to set and say, this is locked. This is what I'm going to use here. And then you can choose to re-roll 2 of them. So then you take whatever die you're choosing to re-roll, and you add 2 more white die and a black die. So 2 more Coyote die and a Crow die. Now the Crow die introduces a little bit of chaos to what's going on here. So if the Crow die rolls a 12, you're done. You've busted. Your turn is over. If it rolls up another number, that can potentially negate any white die of the same number. So you roll a white 3, you roll a black 3, you gotta pull that white 3. It's set aside. You can't use it anymore. And then you can keep rolling if you want to roll, but every time you've got to add more black dice, one more black die into the dice pool. So you increase the chances of busting or of negating a die that you need. But again, you're trying to get to lock in scoreable sets of dice to score. And then so that's how it works. So again, I don't know how well you can envision this. I'm sure there's some videos on this, but it's also not a very expensive game. You ought to just buy it yourself and support a really cool company with some really cool game designers working for them. It also mentioned Nizzy. Nizzy, which is within the world of Coyote and Crow, is the term used for currency. I don't think we really talked about that in our reviews. But there's a form of currency in Coyote and Crow. Really an interesting, maybe a wrap-up discussion if we do a third part of it later, is to talk about the economy in Coyote and Crow, which is really interesting, and it is very much tied to native culture, because there is a standard currency, but it's not really based on capitalism. It's a reflective of the Nizzy. The amount you earn is a day's wage. It's effectively one unit. I can't believe if it's a day's work or an hour's work, but but labor, there's no relative, no one job is more valuable or less valuable than the other, which is again, I think you would see very much, very much division of labor in tribal societies based on people's skills and aptitudes, or sometimes prescribed roles based on their age or their gender sometimes. But um, everything is still kind of equally important. Everybody is seen as important and having a role to play, and so you wouldn't value one person's efforts over somebody else's as long as they're doing their best to contribute to the good of the community. You can see that reflected in there. So there's sort of commerce and in a society that's become as complicated as the one in Coyote and Crow. Um, but it's still got a very kind of native collectivistic bent to it. Anyway, you can use Naasii. You're earning points, and you can treat that as Naasii and count it as a sort of money. So if you want to turn this into a gambling game or a commerce game within Coyote and Crow, you could do it that way. But if you're just playing the game, uh, you know, for the sake of playing the game with your friends, you can start to use those Naasii as points to. There's some optional rules for how you can use Naasii to change the game to alter the die rolls, things like that. So, but once all the players have taken an appropriate number of turns, they tally their scores, and the person with the highest score, or the most Naasii, wins. So it's pretty easy, I think, to drop it into Coyote and Crow as an actual sort of gambling game you could play, or a casual game. There's a really good book by Louis Owens called Bone Game. It is a contemporary fantasy game. I believe it may be the first. It's credited as the first Native American serial killer novel, um, written by a Native American. I think Tony Hillerman has some books prior to that, but Tony Hillerman is actually not Native, even though his characters are Native, and it's all set uh, in the Dene or the Navajo Nation. Tony himself is not. In fact, for a lot of times, a lot of people just assume Tony Hillerman is Native because he has such intimate detail, not only of the geography and the region around where his books are set, but because of his knowledge um, of a Navajo culture and language and things like that he infuses in his books. But he's not actually Native, so he may have written one of the first sort of serial killer books themed around with Native characters and sort of a Native story. But I believe Bone Game by Louis Owens is actually the first one by a Native author, and it's really cool. It's very humorous, and it's part of a series. So some of these are recurring characters from his earlier books. Um, but it's humorous, and it's got a supernatural element and things like that. But the hand game figures prominently in sort of what's going on and the mystery and the magic of what's going on. So I won't spoil it because you should go read it for yourself. But it's a really entertaining read. I remember reading that years ago. So that is Bone Game by and of course Bone Game referring to um, the bones used in the hand game and the stick game, which is why it's sometimes called Bone Game. So check that out. I'll try to put a link to the in the show notes for that as well. So there'll be a lot of links in the show notes today. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of wrap up the month and talk about that, just because I thought it was pretty cool to kind of, if you wonder, Carl had commented on, it's one of the few games he's seen where they go into like sports and games and things like that in the actual world building. But these kinds of games are very, they're social activities. They are recreation, but they also are ways that, you know, Native people love games. What can I say? We're cool. I guess we're all kind of nerds and a little bit. We love our games, and I think probably anybody listening to this can relate to that, right? But these are, again, recognized cultural activities, traditional activities, but also have get involved in other stuff. Like I've noticed. I guess I forgot to mention as I'm kind of looking at my notes here, like uh, the hand game has been used to help teach the ghost dance in certain tribes in the Northwest. Hand game bones and counting sticks have been around for a long time. but the ghost dance movement was very much about cultural preservation and sort of defiance of efforts to strip certain tribes of their cultural and religious traditions. And so, yeah, it's the game itself sort of got involved in teaching the ghost dance and spreading the ghost dance, which is pretty cool if you know much about that. Again, I hope this sparks some of your curiosity to go learn something about, if you're not familiar with the stuff I've been talking about this month, to go learn a little bit about some other cultures and some other folks, maybe people you're not familiar with. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. In a member of the gaming community and the nerd community, I hope everybody's enjoyed this. I also kind of hope that I have done right by my relatives and my ancestors, and sort of highlighting some things about language and culture, and as it applies to my favorite hobby here. So I'll wrap it up and just say again, thank you, or as we say in Cherokee, Wado. Appreciate everybody who listens. Appreciate the callers that from Jason and Brian earlier in the show. And wherever you're doing out there, wherever you're at, take care of yourself and do something to make somebody else happy today. All right. See you later. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.